Spirit Airlines survived bankruptcy once and promised it had found a path back. 5 months later, it was bankrupt again. Then, on May 2nd, 2026, every Spirit flight was canceled. The bright yellow aircraft stopped carrying passengers, and an airline that had reshaped American ticket prices began to disappear. The final fuel shock was real. But Spirit was already financially fragile. So how did the company that made flying cheaper run completely out of runway? The airline that made low fares famous could not survive one more crisis. Spirit did not begin as an airline. The company traced its history to a Michigan trucking business founded in 1964. It entered air charters in 1990 and adopted the Spirit Airlines name in 1992. Over time, the strategy sharpened around one promise: make the visible ticket price as low as possible. The seat was the entry product. Almost everything else could be sold separately. That simplicity made the offer easy to understand. Pay for transportation first, then decide which comforts mattered enough to buy. Spirit's ultra-low-cost model was not simply charging baggage fees. It was a connected operating system. Dense seating put more passengers on each aircraft. A mostly single-family Airbus fleet simplified training and maintenance. Fast turns and high utilization spread fixed costs across more flights. Low fares filled seats. Bags, seat assignments, and other options then lifted revenue per passenger. For years, the joke about paying for everything hid a serious advantage. Customers kept booking because the total trip could still be cheaper. The model also shifted part of the commercial risk from the advertised fare to the customer's choices after the initial click. By 2024, Spirit served 87 destinations in 15 countries. Its operating cost per available seat mile was 11.35 cents, among the lowest in the U.S. industry. That cost advantage helped Spirit discipline the market. Even travelers who never boarded a yellow plane could benefit when larger airlines matched its prices or introduced their own basic economy products. Spirit's presence therefore mattered twice, once through the seats it sold, and again through the prices competitors felt forced to offer. After the pandemic, the system stopped reinforcing itself. Fleet utilization fell. Wages and other costs rose. Airlines added large amounts of domestic capacity, pushing average fares down in Spirit's core leisure markets. Larger carriers copied parts of the low-fare model while offering broader networks and loyalty programs. Then Pratt & Whitney engine inspections grounded some of Spirit's newest aircraft. The airline still had a low unit cost structure, but the gap was no longer wide enough to absorb repeated shocks. A model designed for speed and consistency became exposed when aircraft availability, labor expense, and market pricing moved in the wrong direction together. Spirit's most obvious escape was consolidation. In 2022, it agreed to combine with Frontier, another ultra-low-cost carrier. That agreement was terminated as JetBlue pursued Spirit with a richer offer. JetBlue's proposed acquisition was valued at $3.8 billion. But in January 2024, a federal court blocked the deal on antitrust grounds, accepting the argument that removing Spirit could mean higher fares and fewer choices for price-sensitive travelers. The ruling protected Spirit as a competitor. It could not make Spirit financially healthy. Without a transaction, Spirit had to solve a capital problem, a network problem, and a product problem on its own. On November 18th, 2024, Spirit entered Chapter 11 for the first time. The prearranged plan converted $795 million of secured and convertible notes into equity and raised $350 million of new equity capital. Spirit emerged on March 12, 2025, saying it was significantly deleveraged and better positioned for long-term success. The balance sheet had changed. The operating environment had not. That distinction became crucial. Restructuring liabilities can create time, but it cannot guarantee that each future flight will generate enough cash. The numbers explain why a financial reset was not enough. Spirit's operating revenue fell from $5.36 billion in 2023 to $4.91 billion in 2024 and $3.80 billion in 2025. In 2024 alone, it recorded an operating loss of about $1.11 billion and a net loss of about $1.23 billion. The carrier was shrinking, but it was not yet stable. Revenue per passenger improved in 2025, but fewer passengers, lower capacity, and persistent fixed costs kept the overall business under pressure. On August 29, 2025, less than 6 months after emerging, Spirit filed Chapter 11 again. The earlier case had focused mainly on funded debt and new capital. The second case targeted the operation itself: routes, aircraft, leases, staffing, and market strategy. Reuters reported a roughly $246 million second quarter loss, while Spirit had drawn the full $275 million available under its revolving credit facility. The airline was no longer restructuring for growth. It was restructuring to stay airborne. Chapter 11 now became a tool for rejecting leases, shrinking commitments, and redesigning the airline, not merely exchanging old securities for new ones. Spirit tried to move beyond the pure, ultra-low-cost formula. It introduced Spirit First, premium economy, and value options. It upgraded loyalty benefits, changed the cabin offer, exited more than 200 underperforming markets, and reduced the fleet. The strategy recognized that customer needs had changed. But moving upmarket required time, investment, and trust, 3 things Spirit had in short supply. The new tiers also moved Spirit closer to competitors that already had stronger loyalty programs, broader schedules, and more established premium products. In March 2026, Spirit reached another restructuring agreement with major creditors. The plan contemplated cash repayments, new exit financing, and a much smaller airline. But Spirit's own annual report warned that fuel prices had surged after conflict disrupted energy markets and that elevated costs could undermine creditor agreements or force liquidation. The ultra-low-cost model had always depended on controlling every cost. Spirit now faced the one expense it could not control and lacked the balance sheet to wait it out. Spirit had no active fuel hedges at the end of 2025, and its weak liquidity limited the options available to protect against another sudden price increase. On May 2nd, Spirit announced an immediate orderly wind down. Every flight was canceled. Customers were told not to go to the airport. CEO Dave Davis said the airline had reached a viable restructuring agreement in March. But the fuel price rise left Spirit needing hundreds of millions of additional dollars of liquidity that it did not have and could not obtain. Fuel delivered the final blow. Years of losses, grounded aircraft, failed mergers, and repeated restructuring had removed the cushion. Airlines must pay for fuel, labor, maintenance, airport services, and refunds before a turnaround plan has time to prove itself. Spirit no longer had that bridge. The shutdown affected more than aircraft. Spirit began processing refunds for direct credit and debit card purchases. Other booking methods moved into the bankruptcy process. Airlines offered rescue fares, routes, and employment opportunities, while Spirit worked to return crews to their home bases. a network that had carried price-sensitive travelers across the United States. Caribbean and Latin America disappeared almost overnight. Airports lost a tenant, communities lost nonstop options, and travelers who chose Spirit primarily for price had to search for substitutes in a tighter market. Spirit's disappearance created opportunities, but not a simple winner. Frontier replaced part of its capacity. JetBlue won the auction for Spirit's LaGuardia slots with a $58.5 million bid, narrowly above Frontier's $57.5 million. The transfer still required court and regulatory approvals. Reuters reported that only about half of Spirit's former capacity had been replaced shortly after the shutdown, while fares moved higher. The airline vanished, but the competitive pressure it created did not automatically transfer with its aircraft or slots. Valuable gates and slots could be auctioned individually, but no auction could instantly recreate Spirit's willingness to put very low fares into competitive markets. Spirit did not disappear because passengers suddenly stopped wanting cheap flights. It disappeared because the system that produced cheap flights became too fragile to survive another shock. High utilization weakened. Costs rose. Competitors copied the fare. Aircraft were grounded. 2 mergers failed. The first bankruptcy reduced debt, but not the operating problem. The second ran out of time. Fuel was the trigger. Fragility was the cause. Subscribe to Company Shift for the decisions, systems, and hidden risks behind the companies people trust every day.